Crazy stuff just happened. Unreal Engine 5.1 just dropped yesterday, and oh my gosh, there are so many features in here. It's insane. Not only is it an amazing release generally, there are also some amazing features for people who like to use Unreal Engine for real-time animation. Oh my goodness, there's a lot going on here. Let's just try and take it from the top. Earlier this year, 5 came out, Unreal Engine 5 came out, and it was mind-blowing. There are features in this engine that we've never seen before in video games, we've never seen in production. You know, the greatest two things, and I think you're gonna see more about them in here, was Lumen, which is the real-time global illumination technology that allows Unreal Engine 5 to be able to do like bounce lighting and stuff, and Nanite, the technology that allows it to display high polygon density models. So Lumen's been upgraded to include subsurface scattering that happens on leaves, which looks great. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. We have some general, like at the tech level, good improvements to Lumen, and Lumen Reflections apparently has gotten a bit of an upgrade. It's got high quality translucency reflections. Oh my gosh. So Nanite has also gotten some really big improvements. You can tell, I mean, there's a reason these are at the front of the release. That is a lot of trees. And they are moving. What? They're moving? How? This isn't supposed to exist. First off, you're not supposed to be able to look at this. And second, you're not supposed to be able to see it move. This is absolutely ridiculous. That's wild. So the two takeaways from Nanite is that Nanite now moves, and there's a bunch of customization that you can do in materials, and you can like actually add a Nanite, I don't want to use the word overlay, but you can add some sort of like Nanite representation over existing meshes. Oh, and by the way, both Nanite and Lumen now work in VR, which is nuts. But let's talk about features. There's a process of taking a feature from experimental to beta to a full feature. And currently, a lot of the experimental settings are interesting. It's interesting to see some of the ones that have gone to beta in this because I didn't even know they existed. So let's talk about this like translucent overlay material. Traditionally, when you make something like this, you would have to make like an entire thing. Like you'd have to go into post-processing settings and build something there that would go over top of everything, or you'd have to make like a more complex shader that had different modes. So what they're saying is, functionally in this release, you're gonna get this new way of doing like an overlay on top of what you're seeing here. You have the ability to create these materials that go over your existing materials that you can sort of pop on top. This is one of those things that when you say it out loud, on-demand shader compilation, if you don't know, it doesn't sound cool, but basically what this is it will compile shaders more on the fly. Typically when you open an Unreal project, it starts doing what? Building shaders. It's part of the reason it takes so long to open Unreal. Now already, while streaming this, like the time it took to open Unreal Engine 5.1 seemed to be a little bit faster, so maybe that's correlated. The Strata announcement is interesting. We've been seeing this one coming up in Strata is basically a new material shader model. They've created these Strata Materials, and what they're gonna allow us to do is have greater control over the way surfaces are displayed and rendered. Like we're gonna have a little bit more control over how people see surfaces, and all through this new shader model. Oh, this is huge. This right here, basically it's gonna let our cinema cameras look a little bit more like movies. And that's gonna be awesome. 5.1, so like everything drops sexy or woody in here. So we'll bring in a cine camera actor. So you could actually animate this. Okay, so we also got material editor inline stuff here, which is really cool. So basically what this means is that we can start actually typing in values on the material graph. So they've added a feature called Light Mixer, which is in beta, and basically what this does is show you all the lights in a scene for rapid inspection. So Live Link Face got a CSV importer. This is really cool for anyone who's doing stuff like I do, where they're using the Live Link Face app, which I run constantly. So you can record those now, and there's a way to natively import those into Unreal. So Metasounds has been moved into beta. So I actually think that Metasounds is one of the most like underrated Unreal Engine features. Part of what makes any audio or visual experience feel good is the sound. Metasounds just basically adds a ton of parameters that you can program on all of the sounds that you're sampling in a game. Like it's its own thing, it's its own editor, it's its own world of cool stuff. and they're moving it into beta, so that's really neat. The Waveform Editor. So this is something I'm really excited about. Basically what they're doing is they're letting us trim audio and fade stuff directly within Unreal Engine, which is so nice because I just worked on a game where I was doing a lot of audio stuff, and like I was just kind of tripping over myself trying to get like the in point to be correct, and like it kind of didn't work right. And like even if it's just the features that they're showing us right here, it's just like trimming and fading, like that's still so helpful. That's just like a world of help right there. As some of you know, I am constantly battling with UMG, and it seems like they've done a couple things to make UMG a little bit more usable and easier. So they've added an entire tool palette. Like they've created like a sidebar, like there's like tools. So like there's a canvas panel tool now. So Unreal has a UV editor now, and I'm really confused by this. This UV editor is here. What is it that it does exactly? So they show opening it, and I read about this, but it's like unclear what you're gonna do with it. Like, are people gonna actually change their UVs in Unreal? But it seems like they've made additions to like the modeling stuff too, and it seems like eventually Unreal is just gonna be like everything. So there's like this whole machine learning platform that can be used inside animation blueprints that will kind of selectively figure out how to best show awkward, hard to deform places in meshes, which is really neat. So let's talk about deformers. So anytime we adjust a bone on an animated character, we're deforming the mesh. So what 5.1 does, it lets us kind of take that deforming to a whole new level. It's got its own graph now. Here's a specific one that we can do through Control Rig. The animation term for this is like squash and stretch or something like that. It's gonna add really cool processes and stuff for people who do cartoon style animation. So this Delta Mush deformer, this is super cool. So like look at this one here with the Delta Mush, and then look back over here. Look at this like crease right here. So these creases are stuff that you see in video game characters and animated characters all the time. This tool is creating significantly smoother results. I don't know how it works. It seems like magic. Here's the moment we've all been waiting for. Look at this. This is the physics control component. The physics control component legitimately looks insane. You can see here it can do like cool like world targeting stuff, but then also here's like an example with like this like secondary tail thing going on, so this might be really good. This right here is super cool. So look at the way that this character bounces off the side of this rotating thing. Like look at like the way the shoulder just kind of pushes back, and like it can kind of transition into ragdoll just as easy. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So here's like an electrocution effect that you could do with it. So this is like introducing a bunch of procedural noise and then adding a bunch of input through that to the character. But this is great because it's just but it's physics based. This car rig's crazy. If you look real close at like the hips and like the spine, especially at the chest, you can see that it's a simulated animation. So it's like still animating, I guess. And then, you know, you have your like hand points with, I guess, some sort of IK system, so that they end up being in the right spots, the feet and the hands, because you wouldn't want them to move completely off. But that's really cool. So hit reactions. So if you want really cool, easy bullet effects, this is a really cool demo here. You can see how like this little bar comes up. So people will be climbing and then the bar comes up and the legs totally move. Those are physically dangling legs. And this is very touching. So if you've ever played one of those missions in a game, for me this is exciting because if this is stuff that I can bring into an animation, this could like potentially save me a lot of time, because that looks really good. Like these are features for games, but this looks good enough that you could just put it in an animation. Absolutely insane. Part of what's really interesting to me about these physics controls is that we've already had physical animations. So we've already had the ability to simulate physics during animations. You can see this in this other hallway here. So it'll be interesting to see going forwards how these things interact with each other. That's crazy looking. So animation gameplay. So this is crazy. So they're adding this search pose plugin now. Kind of unclear how this works, but it takes like a database of animation stuff, and instead of using a bunch of different state machines, basically, I don't know if it's machine learning or what happens, but basically this whole thing runs and kind of just like implements a ton of different like poses and just dynamically switches between all of them. It's super cool. Another cool thing is this rewind debugger that's coming out. So currently, when you make animations that run dynamically in Unreal Engine, it's really difficult to try and tell like what you're looking at. It's kind of hard to see, especially if you're switching between states and stuff. So the rewind debugger is really neat because you can like it kind of works like Take Recorder. You're gonna like record it, and then you can see all of your different layers here, like all of these different specific animation layers that are gonna like they're gonna show you what your character was doing while it was looking the way it looked. So you're gonna be able to play back and you're gonna be able to see all that stuff, and it's great. Sequencer now has layer bars, and basically they just let you grab things and move them around because certain things are like very hard to grab, like entire groups of keyframes and stuff. For people who are animators, this is incredible. Like, this is amazing. So, Control Rig. And if you don't know what Control Rig is, it's this really interesting bone-moving solution that lets you do animations on stuff, but it also will let you run some of those animation tools in real time. So you can spawn controls dynamically. It's going to let people like me make more motion capture solutions that are even more adaptive, that include even more models. And I think that's going to be huge. Man, I keep thinking that we're getting towards the end of the cool things, but there are so many more cool things. So Unreal Engine 5 introduced IK retargeting. It was great. It was a huge step up from what we were doing in the Unreal stuff beforehand with plugins and with really bad retargeting stuff just based on rotation. This is going to actually really improve a lot of what I'm working on. So you can see it here. They've added speed planting, which kind of dynamically informs how the feet track onto the ground. And I know these features aren't the features that people are going to get excited about, but it's little things like this that take your games and your films absolutely to the next level. It's so cool. This is something I've been wanting, I should say. I hope it's easy to implement. Pixel streaming is looking like it's doing some wild stuff. Physics. This is a big one. So I think a lot of devs know that physics in Unreal 5.0 wasn't as good as it could be. So physics performed 50% better, at least by the metrics of this test. That's interesting. So the second one was with terrain. So they ran a bunch of static objects to the height field terrain below shows the results of raycasts. We've got more of this physics stuff. To be honest, I haven't seen enough of this. I don't completely pretend to understand what goes on in the world of simulations because I just don't do that much of it. But look at this. Look at this. That's wild. Also amazing that they put the slow motion on it too. A super cool edit. That's just very fun. So now we're getting into the fixes and stuff. And then the weird stuff that you're where does this even come from? The CAD kernel? What are people doing with CAD in Unreal? Is this for people who are doing automotive simulations? The amount of interesting stuff. LiDAR point cloud stuff. It's how am I supposed to use LiDAR point clouds in Unreal? I don't know. I haven't even seen anybody do that. Players can now invite each other to Lyra games, which is crazy. So with Unreal 5, we got this project called Lyra. So it was already a really cool networked gaming example of a really nice modern third-person shooter. But I guess now they've just added the ability for you to invite and join friends by using Epic services. People can join Lyra games with each other. I don't know if that's difficult or if basically Epic is just building a third-person shooter game that just runs inside the editor. This is absolutely bonkers stuff. And now we're sort of getting into the weeds here. So here's my problem, right? I've been streaming this for hours. I've been trying to make this video for hours, and we're halfway through. We're getting to the point where there are no more pictures anymore, and I'm gonna be real honest, my journalistic integrity is falling by the wayside. There's a ton of new stuff here. There's a bunch of bug fixes at this point, but this is my highlights for me.